"You're ruining this neighborhood!" The shriek sliced through the calm of my quiet Saturday morning like a chainsaw through butter. I nearly dropped my hammer, my heart pounding as I spun around to face Linda, the HOA president from hell, storming across my front lawn like a general charging into battle. Her face was beet red, her eyes blazing with righteous fury, and her trusty clipboard was clutched in one hand like a medieval shield. In her other hand, a phone pressed to her ear as she barked to the police about illegal construction and vandalism. All this chaos over what? A wooden fence I'd built around my house. A perfectly legal, city-approved, HOA-compliant fence. My name's Jake, and I'm just a regular guy trying to carve out a slice of the American dream in my new home in Sunnyvale Estates. I'm 32, single, and recently bought my first house, a milestone I'd been dreaming of since I was a kid. I'd heard the whispers about HOA Karen when I signed the closing papers. Neighbors joked about Linda's iron grip on the community, her obsession with rules, and her knack for turning molehills into mountains. But I never imagined she'd lose her mind over something as simple as a fence. I mean, it's just wood and nails, right? Wrong. To Linda, it was a declaration of war. It all started that crisp October morning. I was out in my yard, hammering posts into place, the smell of fresh cedar filling the air. My golden retriever, Max, was sprawled in the grass, tail wagging as he watched me work. The fence was going to be his playground, a safe space for him to chase squirrels without bolting into the street. I'd spent weeks planning this, dotting every I and crossing every T to make sure it was above board. I'd checked the city's zoning laws, 6-foot fences allowed, pored over the HOA's 50-page rulebook, natural wood tones, permit required, and even submitted my application to the HOA board. After a month of silence, approval by default, per their own bylaws, I hired a contractor and we got to work. The fence was half built, looking sturdy and sharp when Linda appeared like a tornado in a pantsuit. "You didn't get my approval," she snapped, jabbing a manicured finger at me. Her voice was so loud it drew neighbors to their windows, curtains twitching like we were starring in a reality show. I tried to stay calm, wiping sweat from my brow. "Linda, I followed the rules," I said, pulling out my phone to show her the city permit and the HOA submission receipt. She didn't even glance at them. "This monstrosity blocks my view," she yelled. Her view? Her house was 3 lots down, across the street, with zero sightline to my backyard. This wasn't about aesthetics, it was about control. I took a deep breath, channeling every ounce of patience. "The HOA guidelines don't mention views, Linda. I'm within my rights." Her eyes narrowed, and for a second I thought she might throw her clipboard at me. Instead, she spun on her heel, muttering, "We'll see about that," as she dialed the police. My stomach dropped. The cops? Over a fence. I stood there, hammer dangling, Max tilting his head in confusion as Linda's voice echoed, "Yes. Officer, there's an illegal structure at 124 Sunnyvale Lane. Send someone now." I couldn't believe it. I'd done everything right, yet here I was, the neighborhood villain, all because I wanted a little privacy and a safe space for my dog. How did it come to this? Let me take you back to the beginning. 6 months ago, I stepped into Sunnyvale Estates with a grin that wouldn't quit. I'd just bought my first house, a 3-bedroom rancher with a sprawling backyard that screamed potential. At 32, I'd scraped and saved for years, skipping vacations and side hustling as a graphic designer to make this happen. The day I got the keys, I walked through the empty rooms, picturing barbecues, maybe kids someday, and definitely a place for Max, my golden retriever, to run wild. The neighborhood was straight out of a postcard. Neat lawns, kids on scooters, and that cozy suburban vibe. Neighbors waved, offered cookies, and seemed genuinely welcoming. It felt like I'd made it, but there was one shadow over this sunny scene, the HOA. I wasn't clueless about homeowners associations. I knew they kept neighborhoods tidy, enforced rules, and stopped people from painting their houses neon green. Fine by me, I'm not a rebel, but Sunnyvale's HOA was different. It was ruled by Linda, a self-appointed guardian of standards who treated the rulebook like a holy text. Stories about her were whispered like ghost tales. The guy fined for a slightly faded mailbox, the family hassled over a temporary inflatable pool, the couple who got a $500 penalty for planting unapproved roses. At the welcome meeting, Linda handed me a 50-page binder of regulations, her smile tight as she said, "We keep things perfect here." I nodded politely, thinking, just don't mess with me, and we're good. For the first few months, I flew under the radar. I mowed my lawn, kept my trash cans hidden, and even painted my front door HOA approved eggshell beige. Life was good. Max, however, was a challenge. He's a bundle of energy with a squirrel obsession that could rival a cartoon character. Twice, he'd bolted into a neighbor's yard, digging up their petunias before I could catch him. I apologized profusely, replaced the flowers, and started keeping him on a leash. But I hated it. He deserved to run free. That's when the fence idea was born. A fence would solve everything. Max could chase squirrels to his heart's content, and I'd have peace of mind knowing he wouldn't escape. Plus, I'll be honest, I wanted some privacy. Sunnyvale was friendly, but too friendly. Sometimes. The neighbor across the street, Mrs. Carter, had a habit of watching me mow my lawn through her binoculars, waving like it was normal. Another neighbor, Dave, kept casually asking about my landscaping plans while peering into my backyard. A fence would give me a buffer, a little bubble of solitude in this fishbowl of a neighborhood. I wasn't trying to be antisocial, just craving a space to relax without an audience. I didn't rush into it. I'm a planner, the kind of guy who reads manuals cover to cover. I started with the city's zoning laws, which were clear. Fences. Up to 6 feet were allowed, no questions asked, as long as they were set back from the property line. Easy enough. Then came the HOA rulebook, a labyrinth of jargon that made my head spin. Fences were permitted, but they had to be natural wood tones, no metal or vinyl, and required a permit application with detailed plans. I spent a weekend drafting sketches, measuring my yard, and picking a cedar stain that screamed earthy elegance. I even consulted a contractor friend, Mike, who'd built his own fence and navigated HOA drama before. Dot every I, Jake, he warned. They'll come for you if you miss a comma. I submitted the permit to the HOA board, complete with photos, measurements, and a polite letter explaining my intent, safety for my dog, privacy for my property. The rules said they had 30 days to respond or it was approved by default. I waited, checking my mailbox daily, half expecting a rejection letter with Linda's signature scrawled in red ink. But nothing came. A month passed. Silence. I double-checked the bylaws. Default approval confirmed. I felt like I'd cracked a secret code. With the green light, or lack of red, I hired a local contractor, Tom, a burly guy with a no-nonsense attitude and a knack for clean lines. We picked out premium cedar, planned a 6-foot design with a sturdy gate, and set a start date. The night before construction, I couldn't sleep, buzzing with excitement. I pictured Max sprinting laps in the yard, me sipping coffee on a patio chair, the fence standing tall like a guardian of my little kingdom. I even imagined inviting neighbors over for a beer, showing off the craftsmanship, maybe earning some cool points. Tom arrived at dawn with his crew and we got to work, digging post holes and stacking boards. The wood smelled amazing and the posts went in straight as soldiers. By day 2, the skeleton was up and it looked better than I'd dreamed. Professional, polished, blending perfectly with the neighborhood's vibe. I thought, this is it. I'm unstoppable. Famous last words. I didn't know it then, but Linda was watching. She'd probably spotted the construction truck from her perch 3 blocks away, her radar for non-compliance pinging like a submarine sonar. While I was napping and Max was chewing a stick, she was sharpening her claws, ready to pounce. The fence to me was a dream come true. To her, it was a challenge to her authority, a personal insult in cedar form. I was about to learn just how far she'd go to keep Sunnyvale Estates under her iron grip, and how much I'd have to fight to keep my backyard. The trouble hit like a storm on the second day of construction. I was out in my yard, the morning sun warming my back, hammering cedar planks into place. The air smelled of fresh wood, and Max was sprawled in the grass, chewing a stick, his tail thumping lazily. The fence was half up, its posts standing tall like sentinels, and I was feeling good, proud even. This was my home, my project, and it was coming together perfectly. Then, like a scene from a bad movie, Linda appeared at the edge of my property, her heels clicking ominously on the sidewalk. She looked like she'd been waiting for this moment her whole life. Her blonde bob was immaculate, her blazer pressed to perfection, and her clipboard, her weapon of choice, was tucked under her arm. Jake! She barked, her voice sharp enough to make Max lift his head. What is this monstrosity? She gestured at my fence like it was a pile of burning tires. I wiped sweat from my brow, trying to keep my cool. It's a fence, Linda. For Max and a bit of privacy. I followed all the rules. Rules? She scoffed, her eyes narrowing. This eyesore is too tall, too ugly, and it blocks my view. I blinked, confused. Her view? Her house was 3 lots down, across the street, with no sightline to my backyard. The only thing my fence blocked was Mrs. Carter's binocular sessions. I took a deep breath, channeling every ounce of patience. Linda, the city allows 6-foot fences, and I submitted a permit to the HOA. You didn't respond in 30 days, so it's approved by default. It's all in the bylaws. I pulled out my phone, ready to show her the digital copies of my city permit and HOA application. She didn't even glance at them. Instead, she stepped closer, her voice dropping to a venomous hiss. You think you're clever, don't you? Sneaking this through? I run this neighborhood and I say this fence is a violation of our aesthetic harmony. Aesthetic harmony. The phrase wasn't even in the rule book, but she wielded it like a gavel. I stood my ground. Linda, I've got the paperwork. It's legal. If you have an issue, take it up with the board. Her face twisted, and for a moment I thought she might chuck her clipboard at me. Instead, she scribbled something furiously, muttering, "We'll see about that." She turned on her heel and marched off, her heels clicking like a countdown to war. I shook my head, figuring she was just blowing smoke. Max nudged my leg, and I scratched his ears, trying to shake off the unease. She's just a bully, buddy, I told him. But deep down, I knew Linda wasn't the type to let things go. The next morning, I found a letter taped to my front door, printed on official HOA letterhead. My stomach sank as I read it. A cease and desist order demanding I halt construction. Immediately, the reason my fence allegedly violated community standards of aesthetic harmony and lacked proper board approval. I laughed out loud at the absurdity. My permit was approved by their own rules. I called my friend Mike, a lawyer who dealt with HOAs before. This is nonsense, he said, chuckling. That aesthetic harmony clause is so vague. It's unenforceable. Your permits are solid, Jake. Keep building. Emboldened, I pushed forward. Tom, my contractor, and his crew worked like champs, and by the end of the week, the fence was nearly done. We sealed it with a weatherproof cedar stain that glowed in the sunlight, and I added a sturdy gate for Max. It was gorgeous, better than I'd imagined. I stood back, admiring the clean lines, picturing Max sprinting around safely. I even snapped a few photos, thinking I'd post them on the neighborhood's X page to show it wasn't the monstrosity Linda claimed. Big mistake. That night I checked X and saw the neighborhood group had exploded. Someone, probably one of Linda's minions, posted a blurry photo of my fence with the caption, "Is this what we want in Sunnyvale?" Comments poured in. It's hideous. Lowers our property values. Who does this guy think he is? I was floored. I'd become the fence guy, a pariah overnight. A few neighbors defended me, pointing out the fence looked fine, and Linda was overreaching. But they were drowned out by her loyalists. One comment from an anonymous account chilled me. Take it down or you'll regret it. I tried to brush it off, but the next day, things escalated. Linda showed up again, this time with a measuring tape, inspecting my fence like a health inspector at a sketchy diner. "You're an inch over the limit," she declared triumphantly, pointing at a corner post. I sighed, showing her the city's 6-foot allowance again. She ignored me, snapping photos and muttering about escalating. This to the authorities. I realized then that Linda wasn't just annoyed. She was on a crusade. My fence wasn't just a structure. It was a challenge to her power, and she'd stop at nothing to tear it down. I went inside, locked the door, and called Tom. We're finishing this fence, I told him, no matter what she throws at us. It was a sunny Saturday morning, the kind where you're supposed to sip coffee and enjoy the weekend. Instead, I opened my front door to 2 police officers, their badges glinting in the sunlight. "Sir, we got a call about an illegal structure," the taller one said, his tone professional but tinged with annoyance, like he'd rather be anywhere else. Behind them, across the street, stood Linda, her arms crossed, a smug grin plastered on her face as she filmed the whole scene on her phone. Like a low-budget Spielberg, my stomach churned. This was no longer about a fence. It was a public spectacle, and I was the unwilling star. I invited the officers into my yard, Max trotting behind us, his tail wagging obliviously. "This is the structure," I said, gesturing to my freshly sealed cedar fence, its rich brown glow catching the morning light. It was 6 feet tall, perfectly aligned, and undeniably handsome, a far cry from the monstrosity Linda had described. I handed them my paperwork, the city permit, the HOA application, the email receipt showing I'd submitted it 35 days ago, and a highlighted copy of the HOA bylaws stating that no response within 30 days meant approval. The officers, a grizzled veteran named Officer Daniels, and a younger guy who looked like he was still learning the ropes, flipped through the documents with raised eyebrows. "Looks in order to me," Daniels said, handing the papers back. "City says 6 feet is fine, and your HOA rules back you up." He glanced at Linda, still filming from her perch, and lowered his voice. "Between you and me, we get calls like this all the time. HOAs, you know." He shook his head, a faint smirk breaking through. The younger officer nodded, clearly eager to leave. They apologized for the trouble, wished me a good day, and drove off, their cruiser kicking up dust as Linda's smirk faded into a scowl. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. Linda's stunt had lit a match, and the neighborhood was about to catch fire. By that afternoon, the Sunnyvale Estates X page was a war zone. Someone, probably one of Linda's loyalists, posted a grainy photo of my fence with the caption, "This is what's ruining our community." The comments were brutal. "Property values are tanking. Who does this guy think he is? It's an eyesore." I scrolled through, my jaw dropping. I'd become the fence guy, a neighborhood pariah overnight. A few brave souls defended me, like my next door neighbor Sarah, who wrote, "It's a nice fence, and Linda needs to chill." But they were drowned out by the mob, fueled by Linda's influence. Then things got creepy. The next morning I found a handwritten note taped to my front door, the words scrawled in angry black ink, "Tear it down or else." No signature, no clue who left it. My heart raced as I scanned the street, half expecting to see Linda lurking behind a bush. I tucked the note into my pocket, trying to shake off the unease. Max sensed my tension and nudged my leg, whining softly. "It's okay, buddy," I lied, scratching his ears. But it wasn't okay. This was personal now, and I was starting to feel like I was living in a thriller movie. The neighborhood split into factions. Sarah and a few others stopped by to offer support, sharing their own Linda horror stories. Fines for unapproved. Garden gnomes, warnings for leaving Christmas lights up past January 5th. "She's been running this place like her personal kingdom for years," Sarah said, sipping coffee on my porch. "Your fence is just her latest obsession." Others, though, were firmly Team Linda. Mrs. Carter, the binocular lady, stopped waving and started glaring. Dave, the nosy guy next door, left a passive-aggressive note in my mailbox about respecting community standards. I even overheard kids on bikes whispering about the fence guy like I was some urban legend. I tried to stay calm, focusing on the fence's final touches. Tom, my contractor, added a sleek latch to the gate, and I hung a small "Beware of Dog" sign for Max, who was blissfully unaware of the drama. But the X-posts kept coming, each one nastier than the last. One anonymous user suggested taking matters into their own hands if I didn't comply. I screenshotted everything just in case. Mike, my lawyer friend, advised me to keep records and stay vigilant. "HOAs like this thrive on intimidation," he said. "Don't give in." By midweek, the tension was unbearable. I'd catch neighbors staring as I walked Max, their whispers trailing me like a bad smell. Linda drove by my house daily, slowing down to glare at the fence, her phone always out, probably snapping more evidence. I started double-checking my locks at night, wondering how far she'd go. The fence was complete. Max was thrilled, and I loved the privacy, but at what cost? I wasn't just fighting for a fence anymore. I was fighting for my right to live in peace. I knew I had to take a stand, or Linda's reign of terror would never end. It was time to fight back. I'd had enough. Linda's reign of terror, her baseless fines, her cop calling, her neighborhood smear campaign had pushed me to my limit. My fence wasn't just a fence anymore. It was a symbol of my right to live in my own home without her shadow looming over me. I decided to fight fire with fire. Digging through the HOA rule book, I found a little-known bylaw. Any homeowner could call an emergency meeting with enough signatures. I spent a Saturday knocking on doors, explaining my side to neighbors who'd been burned by Linda's overreach. Sarah, my next-door neighbor, signed first, her eyes lighting up as she recounted her own battles with Linda over a too colorful flower bed. By evening, I had 20 signatures, more than enough. The meeting was set for the following Thursday. At the community center, a squat brick building usually reserved for potlucks and yoga classes. Word spread like wildfire, and by the time I arrived, the place was packed to the rafters. Neighbors filled every chair, some standing against the walls, their faces a mix of curiosity and tension. The air buzzed with anticipation, like we were about to witness a courtroom drama. Linda swept in, her blazer crisp, her clipboard now a binder stuffed with papers. She looked confident, almost gleeful, as if she'd already won. I clutched my own folder, permits, bylaws, photos of my fence, and took a deep breath. This was it. The HOA board, a group of 5 weary-looking residents, sat at a folding table up front. Linda went first, striding to the podium like a prosecutor. "This fence," she declared, pointing to a blown-up photo of my yard, "is a visual assault on our community's harmony." She rattled off vague complaints. It was too tall, too imposing, a blight on Sunnyvale's charm. She even claimed it threatened property values, though she had no evidence. The crowd murmured, some nodding, others rolling their eyes. Her loyalists clapped. Mrs. Carter practically cheered. I felt my palms sweat, but I stayed calm, waiting my turn. When I took the podium, I kept it simple. "I followed the rules," I said, holding up my city permit. 6 feet is legal. I submitted my HOA application, waited 30 days, and got no response. "That's approval per your bylaws." I projected photos of the fence. Clean, cedar-stained, blending seamlessly with the neighborhood. "This isn't about aesthetics," I said, locking eyes with Linda. "It's about control. I built a fence to keep my dog safe and my yard private. That's my right." A few neighbors clapped, and Sarah gave me a thumbs up. I could feel the room shifting. Then came the game changer. Tom, a retired lawyer who lived 2 streets over, stood up. He'd been quiet until now, but he'd done some digging. "Linda's been abusing her power for years," he said, his voice steady but sharp. He held up a stack of papers, records, of fines she'd issued without board approval, complaints she'd buried, even a case where she'd threatened a family over a kid's lemonade stand. The crowd gasped. One woman shouted, "She fined me $200 for a birdhouse." Another yelled, "My carport got a warning for no reason." Linda's face went pale, her clipboard trembling. Tom proposed a vote. Uphold my fence or enforce Linda's. Cease and desist. The board deliberated for what felt like hours, but was only 20 minutes. The head of the board, a soft-spoken accountant named Ellen, announced the decision. The fence complies with all regulations. The cease and desist is overturned. The room erupted. Cheers from my supporters, grumbles from Linda's crew. She stormed out, muttering about appeals, but the tide had turned. I shook Tom's hand, my heart pounding with relief. But the real victory came a month later at the annual HOA election. Fueled by the meeting's momentum, neighbors nominated Tom as president. Linda lost in a landslide, her reign officially over. Today, my backyard is my sanctuary. Max sprints around, chasing imaginary squirrels, while I sip coffee behind my beautiful cedar fence. Linda still lives 3 lots down, and I catch her glaring sometimes, her phone no longer filming, but her pride clearly bruised. The X page has quieted, the fence guy nickname fading into memory. Neighbors like Sarah stop by for barbecues. Now, and the community feels lighter, freer. Tom's running a fairer HOA with actual votes and transparency. I learned a hard lesson. Know your rights. Stand your ground, and don't let an HOA Karen bully you. My fence stands tall, a reminder that sometimes the little guy wins. If you're battling your own Linda, gather your evidence, rally your allies, and fight smart. You've got this.